This table was one of the first woodworking projects I ever did about 3.5 years ago. The top is made of 2x6 and the table legs were purchased online, and I used 2x4 to create an apron. After 3.5 years of daily use, it's time to redo this table for a couple of reasons. One, the tabletop. Making the top out of 2x6s seemed like a good idea at the time, but as you can tell, there are cracks between each of the planks, and that leaves room for food and crumbs to get in there, and it just makes it a nightmare to clean. And number two, I made the table a little bit small. The configuration that we have it in, with 3 chairs on each side, it's a little bit cramped, and so I'm going to extend the table as well as put on a new top. Here's what it'll look like when it's all done. Let's jump right in. I started by planing all the boards down to the same thickness using my new Wen 3-blade planer, as well as attaching it to my shop vac to reduce the mess of my shop during the planing process. For this project, I'm using 6/4 Knotty Alder. 6/4 is basically the hardwood standard for measuring thickness of a piece of lumber. In this case, 6/4 basically means 1.5 inches thick. After the planing was done, it was time to cut the boards to size. The length of each board is going to be 86 inches. The total width of the whole tabletop is going to be 43 inches. Now it was time to arrange the boards in their final configuration. Note that I made special consideration of where the knots were, not placing too many knots in the same area, but rather spreading them out so I can have a nice uniform and even look. It's now time to glue up the boards and clamp them together. Note that I also clamped the ends of the boards, trying to keep everything as straight as possible. Making sure that you have a nice uniform glue up is going to make your life easier when it comes to the next step, which is sanding everything flat. So spend a lot of time making sure that the boards are aligned. While the tabletop's drying, I'm going to shift gears a little bit to the apron. I mentioned the apron was going to be extended, or the table was going to be made wider. So I'm extending the apron 6 inches. This part is very simple. It's basically 2x4 with a 1x2 on top to give it kind of an accent look. Basically, I'm just going to glue them together and add a brad nail for extra reinforcement. It's been about a half an hour since I did the initial glue up, and now I'm going to just chisel away some of the excess glue. Alright, let's see how this turned out. After removing the clamps, it's time for the most arduous and time-consuming part of the whole project. That's sanding. I used a random orbital sander starting with 80 grit, then 120, and finally working my way up to 220 before starting the finishing process. In between the 80 grit sanding and the 120 grit sanding, I actually filled all the knots and cracks with epoxy and dye. I actually created a separate video that's already posted on my channel. I'll post the link in the description below to that video. To match some of the other furniture that I built, I use a 2-stage staining process. The first stage is using classic gray to kind of give it a gray undertone. The second stage was to use dark walnut. I followed that up with 2 heavy coats of polyurethane to seal the wood. I thought I was recording, but the camera wasn't on, so I didn't get any footage of the polyurethane. but there are plenty of videos on my channel that show me going through the polyurethane process. Now it's time to extend the apron by first removing the old apron and replacing it with the one I just built. The apron was attached to the legs directly via pocket holes that you can see here. It helped that I had my two small helpers with me on this one. As you can see, the new apron's a little bit longer, and also I don't use pocket holes to attach it to the top. I'll use brackets like this. This is the type of spray paint I use to finish the bottom half of this project. I started with the primer and then moved on to a semi-gloss white. Having the pistol grip attachment certainly made this part a lot easier. Here's the table assembled in its final resting place, the kitchen. As I mentioned before, I did 2 heavy coats of polyurethane. When I say heavy, I mean very heavy. I wasn't worried about the evenness, I just wanted to make sure there were thick coats applied. I then used my random orbital sander with 220 grit sandpaper, and I dry sanded the whole surface. This is actually how it looked after I sanded down the surface. So as you can see, it's still a little hazy. Now we've stepped it up to 2000 grit sandpaper. I'm going to wet sand the whole table, lubricating the sandpaper with some water. So I'm just going to spray water across this whole area and then wet sand the whole area until I don't see any more high spots. And then after that, we're going to switch to the buffing pad and use some car polish for your car paint to do the final step in polishing the table, making it look glass smooth. Let's get started. Well, here it is, a nice glass-like even finish, perfect for a dining table. I'm very happy with how this project turned out. We've actually been eating on this table for the last week and a half, and it's just been such a joy to not have to fish out food from between the cracks after we eat, and also have an even surface so that plates don't wiggle around. Also, we have more room, so we're not crowded like we were before. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like button below. If you didn't, feel free to leave me a comment as to why not. Also, subscribe if you want to keep up with the different projects I have going on. I have some upcoming automotive projects I think you would really enjoy. That's all for now. I'll see you on the next project.